Hey guys, welcome to Forehead Corner. I'm your host Martha Kelly, and this is a podcast. I don't know. If you're confused what you're looking at. It's a podcast. Um, this week's episode, I'm going to be talking about a documentary I watched. It's not a new documentary. I like to wait until things are way in the rearview mirror, as far as the pop culture is concerned, and wait till everyone's given their 2 cents about it and forgotten about it, and that's when I pounce. So it's called The Way Down, Greed, or God, Greed, let me look. The Way Down, God, Greed, and the Cult of Gwen Shamblin. And the way is spelled W-A-Y. However, you may have noticed or may not have noticed, I bought her book at a discount, of course. And because her weight loss plan, which was a Christian-based, faith-based weight loss program, was called the Way Down Diet, the Way Down program, and the Way Down Workshop, but it was WEIGH. Anyway, I just thought this would be like a non-upsetting documentary because I assumed it was just going to be like the upsetting things would be somebody lost too much weight. And I'm not saying that's not bad. And also, I'll just say I had a cousin who passed away from anorexia, so I don't take that stuff lightly. But what I didn't think is that there would be any child abuse. But guess what? These evangelicals of the 80s and 90s, they cannot fucking stop abusing children and directing other people to abuse their children. And so I'm not going to watch any more documentaries about any kind of Christian community, cult, church, none of it. I'm done. I'm my guard's down, and I'm enjoying how crazy her hair was, and the drama. It's a southern, I'll get into it, but southern wealthy enclave of community where the church was. And then just thinking it's just going to be kind of some gossipy stuff, kind of like LuLaRoe, the documentary about the MLM. No, it was called Lula Rich, and it's a documentary about LuLaRoe, the leggings company. That one was kind of fun because it's about an MLM, and there's nothing about children in it, even though the founders are Mormon. Mormons famously also, for whatever reason, really get a kick out of hitting kids. I don't get it. I'll never understand it. I will say, as a Gen X, yes, my parents did hit me. Did they get a kick out of it? Did they have a whole culture around making jokes about the objects they hit me with, or hanging a piece of wood on the wall or a belt? And no. Normal people, even if they believe in corporal punishment, they view it as a necessary and extremely unpleasant part of parenting, not as a, yeah, let's really, I can't. I'm so, and before I get into the documentary, I do want to say shame on every elected official at the local, state, and federal level, everyone, that no one has ever made it their cause to challenge conservative religion's right to beat their children. We should have addressed this decades ago. It's sickening. And you'll find out in one of the episodes when I get to it, because it was a 5-episode docu-series, what happened. I'll just spoiler. And by the way, I'm going to tell you everything that happened in this documentary. So if you haven't seen it and you want to, don't listen to this until after you watch it. But a family that was a part of her church, the Remnant Church, who she advised on how to parent one of their kids who was a very difficult kid, supposedly. Those parents beat their child to death. And so I'm really fucking pissed. Okay, guys, I'm sorry, but let's get to the good news. The very first episode of this docu-series begins with a small plane crashing. All 7 people on board died. All 7 of them were leaders of this horrible remnant church, and one of those people was Gwen Shamblin. They don't reveal that until I think like the 3rd episode, but you suspect it. But I'm telling you now to celebrate it. Good. I'm glad you're dead, bitch. You told people to beat their kids to death. Go fuck yourself. Go down in a plane. I wish all those people would go down in a plane. And I'm going to be fair and say I wouldn't mind if I went down in a plane too, because I'm terribly afraid of getting older, much more so. I mean, being elderly and frail and like, this isn't how I wanted to talk, what I wanted to talk about. I'm just saying, if I'm going to wish a plane crash death on anyone else, I should be willing to say, go ahead and crash my plane too if you want to. Not on purpose, but like if there's a God who is like, wow, you're wishing that on someone, I'm going to do it to you, go ahead and do it. I'd rather that than end up bedridden when I'm 80. Please. If I live long enough to get to a point where my doctors, I don't even have a primary care physician right now, but if I get to a point where my doctors are saying where I can barely walk and I'm heading towards bedridden, I'm going to start jumping out of airplanes. And at some point, I'm just not going to pull the parachute release. Anyway, good news. Everybody dies. Also, one of the other 7 church leaders who died had a tape. There's a recording of him in the episode that's about the kids and the child abuse. There's an audio recording of him talking about beating his 2.5-year-old daughter all day in order to break her spirit. Like, I want to murder people who do that. I'm not exaggerating. I want to kill them. Will I? No. I don't have it in me to take a life, but I would love it if they drop dead. And just for fun, gonna throw in here, if you like what you're hearing, if you like hearing about horrible things and the person telling you wishing death on people, go ahead and sign up for my Patreon. It's patreon.com/forehead corner pod, and we have a $5 tier and a $10 tier. And the great thing about both of them is that you're paying a subscription fee to hear episodes that were not good enough to be free. That's how I do it. A lot of other people, everyone does their Patreon differently, but my feeling is if you want access to my secret shame of not doing a good enough job on an episode, you better pay for it. You're gonna pay for it. The $10 tier, the $5 and $10 both get the weekly Patreon episode, Patreon only episode, and then the $10 tier also gets access to the vault episodes, which, I mean, if it were up to me, the vault would go so deep that it hits the earth's core. That's where I wish these episodes were. Anyway, if you want to subscribe, do it. And if you can't afford it, or if you can't afford it and don't want to, no shade from me. Also, if you want to send some email, I can't give you a physical mail address, but if you want to send some email, it's foreheadcornerpod@gmail.com. And I am, as always, recording at the wonderful Sides and Sounds studio in Burbank, California, with Jason Crow, who is a sound engineer and producer on this podcast. All around great fellow. in the room with me now. It's always weird to talk about someone when they're in the room, but he works with a lot of creative people. So go to sidesandsounds.com if you need a self-tape or want to record a podcast or whatever. If you want to start, I'm going to say this, and I haven't cleared this with Jason, but if you want to start a witches and warlocks YouTube show, just go ahead and reach out and talk to him about it. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want before you end up 80 and bedridden. That's my motto. Okay, so it starts with the plane crash. They tell you it's 7. They have news footage saying it's the 7 of the leaders of the remnant church. And then they, cut to the opening credits. And then the cover art for the documentary is a cartoon of Gwen Shamblin. Her hair is super high. You can see it if you go. I watched it on HBO Max. It's super high. I mean, it's like as high as having a second head on top of your head. And I thought there must be an exaggeration, but then when you see her, when they do the next scene is her giving a deposition, and it is every bit as high as the cartoon. And then they go to testimonials of people saying how much weight they lost in her church. So just for a moment, I'll say what you find out in this episode is that, so she started out in her community church, Brentwood, Tennessee, a very wealthy community outside of Nashville where it's like big houses on big, green plots of land, like big acreage, wealthy people, but relatively small. So everyone grows up together, goes to school together from kindergarten through senior year of high school. It's football games on Friday nights, church on Sundays, and there's a church on every corner. I got all this information from a young woman who was a babysitter for the Remnant Church. She's one of the few. No, that's not true. I was going to say she's one of the few good people in the documentary. There are some other ex-members, and there's parents of a girl who got sucked into it who are good people. So never mind. But when Gwen started this diet thing, she was a member of one of the churches in the Brentwood community. Really wealthy white people, mostly white people, very wealthy. So in she started out the losing weight with Jesus thing while she was a member of someone else's church. And what she basically did was take the idea of intuitive eating and add on to it. It was like she would tell people, like, there's no foods that are off limits. You don't have to weigh and measure what you eat, and there's no diet to follow. It's just don't eat when you're not hungry. So only eat when you're physically hungry, and stop when you're satisfied. And every other time that you want to reach for food, don't. That's intuitive eating. But what she added on to it was every time you want to reach for food when you're not physically hungry, don't, but instead run to Jesus. And it was also like she said, we need to stop bowing down to the refrigerator and get back to bowing down to God. Now, here's my thing. Why I cannot believe in a God that needs human beings to bow down to it, because especially if it's supposed to be a parent God, a father. God is the father, which is what Christianity says. I got in a fight with a microphone. Every Abrahamic religion, God is a father figure. It's a patriarchy. My dad didn't need us to bow down to him. And my dad was kind of patriarchal. I mean, he was patriarchal, but he didn't need people bowing down to him. Why would the creator of this entire complicated, beautiful, horrible, unknowable universe be like, if these humans on this tiny planet in this universe, if these motherfuckers don't bow down to me, I'm not going to make it. I'm going to crash out if you guys don't get on your knees and bow down to me. I just can't believe in that. It doesn't make any sense to me. But I know in her religion, she grew up Church of Christ. In her religion, it is very authoritarian, and it is very much God is king. You bow down, you serve, you sacrifice yourself, you humble yourself, and you obey. There's a huge emphasis on obedience in her church. But she starts this food thing. First, she kind of starts it for herself because I guess she gained weight in college, which who hasn't? And also, I saw something really interesting years ago. One of the reasons that a theory of why people might gain the freshman 15 is because it's for a lot of kids when they go away to college and live in the dorms, it's the first time they've been away from their parents. And food is nourishment, and food are things you commonly receive from your mom from the time you're born. Actually, from the time before you're born, her body is nourishing you. And then you're born, and she, if you're breastfed, but even if you're not, she's holding you and giving you a bottle and then feeding you as you grow up. And like in my family, for sure, and in my mom's family, food was definitely the way that my mom showed us love, and it's the way her mom showed her love. My brother told me recently that my grandmother, who's a mysterious figure on my mom's side, my personal hypothesis is that she was a sex worker during the Great Depression for survival, because her first husband, not my grandfather, left her during the Great Depression, abandoned her and their 3 kids. And during the Great Depression, there was no social safety net. And if you didn't have family with money, there was no help at all. You were on your own. That's why there were like tent cities, and there's a film called They Shoot Horses, Don't They? And you can see how it's about the Great Depression and how desperate people were for any money just to get food. So that was my grandmother, abandoned by her husband, no family with money to help, 3 kids. What they normally told women in that position to do in those days was to give their children to an orphanage. But my grandmother refused to do that and could never get an answer out of my mom. And maybe because her mom never gave her an answer of, well, how did she support the 4 of them? My mom said, I don't know. I wonder, maybe she took in sewing. Like, what? No. I believe she was a sex worker. And my feeling for that is more power to her. It's not something I would want to do. And the great news is no one has ever tried to encourage me to do it. There is no demand. With supply and demand sex work, when it comes to me as the product, there's no demand. No one's saying, and I'm not saying no one has wanted to have sex with me, or that there might still be people who do. I'm saying even the guys, I don't want to talk about it. Even the guys I've had sex with would never say, Martha, you could get a good price for this. I'm sure it was fine. In my defense, none of them could have gotten paid to have sex either. We were all terrible. Why am I? There's one guy that I dated that I had sex with that I wouldn't want to hurt his feelings. But our sex was not enjoyable anyway. And it was maybe more my fault than his, but That's why I feel like, and I will get back to the documentary, but that's why I feel like even if Taylor Swift is only with Travis Kelce because he's good at sex, good for her. I'm sorry, Jason, to talk about this in front of you. As we would say in the olden days, in mixed company, it's awkward. But I want to say this. No, and I'm excluding Jason and every guy that I'm friends with or related to. I'm not shitting on any of you. I will say, in the population at large, I think there are a lot of straight men who are not only are not good at sex, but don't even try to learn how to be good at it. And maybe that's also true of straight women, I don't know. But you think about Taylor Swift and who she dated. Artistic boys. I mean, she started, I don't know who she slept with first, but even if it was the older guys like Jake Gyllenhaal and what's his name? John Mayer. Thank you. John Mayer. Like, those guys are probably not great. They're moody artists, emotional guys. And I'm not saying that kind of guy can't be good at sex. I'm saying, why are you dating a teenager? If you were, again, I'm going to be graphic and then I'm going to wrap this part up. If you are a straight man who's good at fucking, you're going to have hot adult women kicking your door down to request time in your company. So no, I don't think Jake Gyllenhaal and John Mayer were good at it because they were dating a 19-year-old, which is like, and they were in their late 20s. Like, you're not, if you're great in bed, you'd be dating women your own age in their 20s. And then like Harry Styles, he was a child when they were together. They both were, I forget who else. Maybe Tom Hiddleton. What's his name? Hiddle. I have to just say, when I looked over at Jason trying to get that name right, the way that he turned and looked at me, and I'm not saying this is how you felt, but the look on his face was like, who are you besmirching now? Maybe Tom was good, but what I am saying is, we all know without a shadow of a doubt, Travis Kelce is good at intercourse. There's no doubt about it. And if that's the only reason that she's with him and married him, good for her. How on earth did I even get on this topic from Gwen Shamblin? Grandmother probably was a sex worker. Oh, during the Great Depression, her brothers were running moonshine. That's how they were getting by, because it was during Prohibition. And you use sugar to make moonshine, and there were rations on sugar because it was the Great Depression. Wait, and this was later. This was in the late 30s, early 40s, before World War II, when my mom was a little kid. But my brother told me my mom's mother went to her brothers who were running moonshine and said, give me a 10-pound bag of sugar or I'm going to turn you in. These babies need sugar. They don't have any sweets. You give me that sugar. And they did. So she was a tough broad, but I never once saw her express any kind of affection towards my mom when we would visit her in the summer. Every year growing up, we visited her. She was affectionate to us, her grandkids, but not to my mom. There was no real warmth between them, except when we first got there and when we left, they would hug and they would both cry. But my grandmother did show love with food, and so did my mom. And so this theory of I'm working my way back to why people gain weight in colleges, because it's basically just they miss their mom. And so they're eating more food to try and get that feeling of getting love from their mom. I didn't need to call my grandmother a whore. I didn't need to say all of Taylor Swift's boyfriends were bad in bed. I didn't need to say all mine were bad in bed. I didn't need to say I was bad in bed. But we're back to the documentary. Okay. This is kind of crazy. There's a clip of Gwen in a 60 minutes type TV interview, but it wasn't 60 minutes. And the interviewer asks her if she thinks it's appropriate to use the Holocaust to promote her weight loss plan. And she starts to defend herself. And then her publicist comes into the shot and literally kind of picks Gwen up and pushes her and says this interview's over and pushes her out. So in a later episode, we get to hear what that refers to, which is Gwen saying about how you can lose weight if you just eat less. And she says, well, people in concentration camps have very limited diets, very limited calories, and they all lost weight. So that's who we're dealing with. By the way, she started out with kind of, I don't know if you can see, I don't know and I don't care. I'm sorry. Because you can look it up online. But she had normal hair. Like my hair, sometimes this part of it is as high as her hair started out. But the more famous she got, the higher her hair got. But I realized something about her hair. So GLP-1s can make your hair fall out. When I was in the food cult and I lost 20 pounds back in the day and I got really small, my hair fell out. I think that because of she's very thin, and I think that her hair was falling out. And like the way that you make it look like you don't have thin hair when you have thin hair is you tease it and give it look like it has volume. And it's like a circus tent. Like a circus tent could be huge, but it's empty inside. It's like, I mean, not empty. There's, what do you call stadium seating and the ring, 3-ring circus, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. But I mean, it's not a solid structure. I'm not a scientist and I'm not going to explain that any further. So she starts out her weight loss thing in this church and then is so successful, it sweeps the nation, and it's something like a huge amount. I'll find it, but it's a huge amount of churches all over the country that are adopting this, it's intuitive eating, but you're dragging God into it. God, keep me from eating a ding dong, basically. And people are losing weight. And because it's so successful, she decides to open her own church. And so she, with a few other couples, she and her husband and a few other couples. By the way, you don't find out that she had a first husband she was married to for 40 years until episode 3. Like, we go through a few hours of her story before we find out she ever had a first husband. But he was the one, David Shamblin, and a few other couples, they founded the Remnant Church, and they built it in or right outside of Brentwood. And that is where her cult really took off. So I've been talking for like 25 minutes and I'm not even halfway through episode 1 of this. We might do more than one, maybe next week's episode if I don't get through all the episodes, all the docu-series today. Maybe we'll do a part 2. Don't panic. I'm saying to myself, no one else cares. Okay, so Brentwood is the wealthiest county in Tennessee. It's referred to as the Brentwood bubble because it's all rich white people living in it. And there is a church on every corner, and it's very Southern evangelical, wealthy white people. And I will say, Southern white rich people be normal challenge. That's a thing people say, and I couldn't figure it out. And that's a meme or some whatever you call it. People say on the internet. Basically, find me a small, tight knit, wealthy community of white people in the South, and we will find out they are up to something. Is it always the worst possible thing? No, but they will be up to something. Maybe they're running a gambling ring. I mean, I certainly would have preferred that to this. Maybe they're an MLM, but it's hard, I've learned, and I grew up in a predominantly white suburb. It wasn't wealthy, but it was was middle class, and then some people were upper middle class, but it was almost all white people. It's weird. I don't know if it's really something about white people passed down through Western European white people passed down through generations. I don't know if it's that or if it's the specific American uh white supremacy that permeates things, but we really shouldn't all be together. It's like when all the bad kids are together, sitting together in a classroom. Like, we shouldn't. If you don't have diversity and you just have white people, it's not ideal. I'll just say from my experiences, I don't know what it is about us, but anyway, there are plenty of white people I know and love, and I'm not saying, oh, I'm some terrible white person. I'm just saying when it's a homogenous community, I don't know. Okay, I already talked about that. The remnant church that they formed has around 2,000 members, which is kind of decent size. Oh, then we get to, I wrote, holy shit, Gwen Shamblin lives on a plantation. It's called the Ashlon Plantation. So I looked it up today because they don't really go into it any further than that. They just say she bought and then moves into a plantation that's right outside of Brentwood. And it's where they have weddings for members of the church and other big events. And they don't really say anything else about the plantation. So I looked it up. There's a website called historythroughhomes.com. I didn't have a lot of time this morning. My nephew and his girlfriend stayed over last night. And when I have people at my house, I am preoccupied with making sure they're comfortable, that they're not hungry or thirsty or having a headache or too hot or too cold. Like it's so I didn't spend as much time looking it up in this website. Not good, because they had a complete detailed history of this plantation, on the side of who initially bought the land and built the plantation and then who bought it after them and who after them, and all the way to the present day. Not a single reference to the enslaved people that worked there and lived there. It was built in, well, I should have written this down. But it was built in the early 1800s, I think like around 1830. The original owners built it. And they bought it they were very wealthy. They owned another plantation. They were very wealthy, and they bought it as a luxury summer home. But it was built by enslaved people. Enslaved people worked there. Nobody fucking talks about it on that website. And I'm sorry, but having weddings and happy events on a plantation, to me, is as ghoulish as doing it at a former concentration camp. Why don't you just go to one of the famous homes where someone murdered their whole family and have a wedding there? I mean, it's despicable. Okay. Oh, this is how I wrote it. This is how I wrote that meme in my notes. Southern white people living in a wealthy community, be normal challenge. Still not that funny. And then they have some more former members saying that the Remnant Fellowship is like everyone dresses the same and looks the same and acts the same, acts like they're happy all the time. Because they are required to do that. I already talked about her hair, and now we hear from this couple whose daughter gets sucked into the cult. And there's a little bit of confusion about what set off their alarm bells initially, which I'll tell you what the documentary says, but I don't really understand it. But their daughter it was in middle school or early high school, started dating a boy who was a member of the Remnant Church, and the parents described him as very nice but very intense. And you can tell the way they were talking about it, like they weren't crazy about it. They were not members of the Remnant Church. Then one day they found pictures on her phone, their daughter's phone. They say they found graphic pictures on her phone, and they say their daughter and this boy were reenacting stuff. They don't say what that means, and I can't imagine. I don't know what it. The only time I've heard the term reenacting is in relation to like Civil War reenactors and, you know, Revolutionary War reenactments. Like, I know there are people who do that for fun. Couldn't tell you why. You couldn't get me to spend a whole day outside in this. I'm sorry to do this tangent. The Revolutionary War reenactments or the Civil War reenactments, they've got to all be in the South or in the Northeast, because that's where people lived during the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. Like, there wasn't, the whole West was not a fully developed part of the United States yet. So most of the Civil War only went up through, if you were looking at like, why am I trying to, like, there was Kansas, wherever that is on the map of the United States. I don't think the Civil War battles went much west of Kansas, which is the Midwest. Revolutionary War wasn't everybody still living in like Massachusetts essentially? So what I'm saying is, you're doing these reenactments where you're outside in parts of the country that have intense weather. If you're doing it during the summer, you're dealing with mosquitoes and bees, God knows what else. If you're doing it in the winter, you're dead. So you'll never catch me being a reenactor. The only other context I've heard about reenacting is when in infomercials or true crime shows where they have people reenacting, or documentaries. Sometimes they have people reenacting parts of stuff. So I can't imagine that these two teenagers were reenacting either of those wars or true crime. I can't imagine what it means to say, we found graphic pictures on my daughter's phone. She's in high school. Her boyfriend's in high school. We found graphic pictures on her phone where she and her boyfriend were reenacting stuff. Cannot fathom what that could have been. But they go on to say that her boyfriend coached her on what to say to her parents about the church, and also that the church church members bought her a burner phone so that her parents couldn't track what she was doing and who she was doing it with, because they're pulling her into the cult. And her boyfriend told her to delete a bunch of emails, and he also told her that there was evil in her house, meaning her parents. This is just run-of-the-mill cult stuff. Hide evidence, and also, P.S., your family's probably the devil. That's how you isolate people and get them from their family and get them in a cult. And her parents are pretty distraught, talking about how they could tell their daughter was changing and they felt like they were losing her. And then we have a jump scare to Gwen with her top hat height hair. And the dad's saying Gwen's motivation wasn't money, it was power. But side note, what we find out later is that Gwen had a fuckload of cash. She had so much money. She became extremely wealthy selling this book and I think she wrote 2 others, and then having all over the country, having the Way Down workshop that people would pay to go to, and then having her own church where people tithe. And so she had she lived in a huge plantation. And then we find out later she had a lot of other extravagant lifestyle stuff. So then we get to the weight loss part, and we hear her saying, "Welcome to the Way Down workshop." Oh, and then whoops, that's a false alarm. Now we're talking about her childhood. I'll just say, she was raised in the Church of Christ, and the people in this documentary describe the Church of Christ as being one of the most conservative churches in the South, and also their philosophy in the Church of Christ is that we can build a perfect church here on earth, and it's the Church of Christ. And then I looked this up just to be a bitch. They did not oppose slavery. I'm going to throw everybody under the bus who didn't oppose slavery because this church was formed in the 1800s. And I remember when I went back to school in 2013, I took a history class, and it was about the Civil War. And so we read Frederick Douglass's book, The Narrative of the Life of a Slave. And he talks about how in the 1800s, when America had what was it called? It wasn't called the Revival, but it was like a movement of people becoming really Christian swept the country. There's been more than one time when that's happened, but it happened one of the times was in the 1800s, and he thought, and other enslaved people thought, great, now they're going to see that they shouldn't be holding slaves because they're becoming super religious. And it was like, no, we're not. We're perfectly fine with being super religious and still holding slaves. Okay, so then they do come down to back to the Way Down workshop. Gwen is saying your body is a temple. The Holy Spirit is in you. You are not your own. You are bought for a price, meaning Jesus sacrificing his life on the cross. So you need to devote your life to doing God's will. I will talk in the Patreon about this is one of the places where there's some similarities between that way of looking at things and AA and OA, both of which I was in. Again, I don't understand the idea of believing that a creator made you for the sole purpose of you having to spend your life paying them back for making you. That doesn't make sense. Okay, so then she went, then someone was talking about her as a kid. She ate a lot, went to college, gained weight. She says it was because of sin and lack of self-control. So then she starts preaching to people. She studies nutrition in high school, and then she starts preaching to people and says, anytime you want to turn to food 15, 20 times a day, you should run to God. And then they have a bunch of people who are like on stages with her at like workshops or in the church where they're doing the thing. People used to love to do this in the 80s and 90s, like holding up pants that used to fit them that are now like, 2 people their size could fit in. People love a giant pair of pants. And I think Jared from Subway, when he lost weight eating Subway sandwiches, I believe there was a big pair of pants that starred in those commercials. A former member says, then Gwen started incorporating scripture, and then some people started coming to her church and losing weight. But what was happening is that they would lose the weight and then they would gain it back. This happens in OA as well. The thing, I won't pretend to have a huge amount of knowledge or an ability to articulate this well. But I've read a lot, I've struggled with it myself, and the thing for most people who have been overweight their whole lives, there is for most people, most of the time, it's like you can lose weight in any way, any method or diet or whatever, liquid diets or pills or working out or any kind of diet, any kind of weight loss plan can work for you, but but it always comes back. And of course it does with this too. My own my opinion, which is not super informed, it's just my own experience and people I've known. I don't think that that's true on the whole because there's one reason that happens for everybody. I think a lot of people it's genetic. That's why GLP-1s are actually effective because they treat that stuff. Like a GLP-1 doesn't um it's not like Dexatrim where it just makes you not as hungry, like it suppresses hunger. It slows your digestion. I don't wanna fucking talked about it already. Anyway, I mean, some people it's emotional. It's related to emotional stuff. Some people it's physical. Some people it's both. But it happens with her as well. People lose weight and then they start to gain it back. And then Gwen asked God, I guess in front of oh, no, I guess privately asked God, "What are we gonna do about this?" And then she claimed that God said to her, "These people are not being obedient, they are not following God, and that's why they're not keeping the weight off." And the woman telling this part of the former member saying this about what Gwen did says that's when it became a crazy cult. So then we go to an interview where Gwen is saying, we teach, I already said that, teach people to stop bowing down to the refrigerator, bow down to God. And it's like, you don't, there's people are saying about how it worked, which I've already talked about. It's intuitive eating. They're like, you can stop eating pizza in the middle of a piece or eating candy in the middle of it because you're not hungry anymore. So you put it down. We already went through that, and it's like praying when you want to eat. When you're not hungry, pray, and then you'll lose the weight, which makes God happy because now you're thinner. It became a huge success. Okay, here it is. 14,000 churches around the country were teaching the way down method. Around 250,000 people were doing it. Gwen was doing a bunch of media. This was 1997. As she becomes more famous and gets thinner, her hair gets bigger. We already covered why. It's because her hair is probably thinning. She's doing great with the book tour. She's touring with every book that comes out, doing lots of TV spots, making shitloads of money. She's asked by one reporter if she's worried that she's sending the message that God only loves you if you're thin. And she answers, "No, I don't think that. I think God cares about the heart and doesn't look so much at the outside. But I think that he's jealous. I think God is jealous when we love material things or objects more than we love him." Again, I don't think so. You know who's jealous is my cat Gary, because my nephew and his girlfriend came over yesterday around 2:00, hung out. We went to see Spider-Man Brand New Day. I'll talk about that on the Patreon. It was great. I loved it. Came back. We had dinner. I kind of went to bed not that long after, and they stayed up, watched TV. They slept out in the living room. That's where Gary sleeps. He has he has a spot on the couch, and it was my spot, and sometimes it still is, but he decided it's mostly his. Anyway, they're sleeping on the couch. It's a giant couch. No brag. I didn't know how big it was when I bought it. I bought it online from Living Spaces, and I love it. It's like a furniture made for people who are 30% bigger than most humans, and I love it. But Gary was mad. When I was about to go to bed and I was doing dishes before I went to bed, Gary sat on the corner and yelled and looked and was acting angry because my nephew and his girlfriend were on the couch, and Gary, that's where he goes at night. And then this morning he was even madder. That's jealousy. You're telling me God is like, I'm bored with that. I'm just going to do some fake anger, but I don't have the energy. Okay. Yeah, I can't believe in a God that's jealous, that experiences jealousy. You, sir, if you're there, you created the refrigerator and the food in it. You're telling me you're jealous that I want to eat it? Get out of here. At one point, she's speaking to the congregation of her church and saying, selfishness, self love, and self centeredness is an abomination. And I'm going to hit this in bold because that is very similar to sentiment in the AA Big Book and in 12-step programs that I'm going to talk about on the Patreon. Okay. Someone's talking about, so is this, bolding it. I'm sorry that I didn't have time to do this before, but I was trying to protect my niece and nephew, my nephew and his girlfriend, from my cat who wanted to beat them up for being on the couch still. Okay. So they talk about also the Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Okay. Other religious people weighing in at this point about Gwen and what she was teaching at her church. She was teaching, she basically they're saying she denied the Trinity, which is the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. The Father, God, the Son, Jesus, the Holy Ghost is the Spirit of God that lives inside you, is how they explained it. And that she was only focusing on God. She wasn't, I don't know. That part I also didn't totally get, but it says a bunch of people got mad at her because she denied the Trinity. She started pressuring people to join the remnant church that she founded. Okay, so she had employees because I'm not going to keep doing this, but this book, she had a bunch of people working for her because of the success of this book and the workshops, teaching the workshops all over the country. And she told them all of her employees had to join her church. And then they started telling people who were doing the Way Down program that they needed to join Remnant Church. Whereas initially it started out, it didn't matter what church you went to. And I guess the way that she denied the Trinity, I can't remember. I don't understand it. Okay. There was also a lot of pressure on people to lose weight quickly. One lady's saying she lost 150 pounds, and then Gwen told her to fast, which means starve yourself so you can lose even more weight as quickly as possible. And then they said people being interviewed for the documentary, ex-members say it became about Gwen being the authority, and she is speaking for God. And anytime you question her, you're questioning God. So this is very similar to Michael Warnecki from the last horrific documentary about a Christian cult that I watched, which was about Andrea Yates. And it's called The Cult Behind the Killer. I don't remember what episode I did it, but you can look it up. I trust you to find it. The Cult of Behind the Killer, the Andrea Yates story. Michael Warnecki, it was the same thing. Like Gwen, he said, God has given me authority to tell you what he said. And Gwen is saying the same thing. And both of their cults, and any cults like them, their focus of their type of Christianity, their focus is on obedience to authority above everything else, above how you treat other people, what kind of work you do in the community, above honesty and integrity and anything, and helping the poor, treating people with love. The highest, most important thing is obedience to authority. And they say, I'm the authority, I'm your channel for God's authority. So when I'm telling you something, it's coming from God, and obedience to that comes before everything else, which not great. If we're going to be honest, that is not a great, that is fertile ground for shit to go sideways. So, oh, and there's another, guys, I'm sorry, I gotta hit it with another, bold, so I can find it later, because it's like, it reminds me of something from the food cult I was in. Okay, episode 1, we're finally getting to the end of it. Maybe I can speed through episode 2, and then we do the rest on next week's. This will be part 1. I'm sorry. There's a woman named Natasha Pavlovich who has a daughter with a man named Joe Lara. And we find out in this episode that Gwen marries Joe Lara. And this is what is the word? Sequence that we find out. For all of this episode, we've only been hearing about Gwen. As far as, we have not heard of her having a husband. She has appeared to be a single woman who, at the time of the making of the documentary, looked to be in her probably early 60s, mid 60s. And no mention of any partner. And then one of the former members is talking about all the harm that Gwen did, that her cult did, and said, I really thought it was all going to fall apart when she married Joe Lara. I can't believe people didn't leave at that point. And so you're set up to be like, what are we going to find out about this guy? And I thought, like, oh, she married a guy because in the South, in patriarchal societies, but I think especially my mom was from the South. It's like, you don't want to be an old maid. It's like the worst thing, the most embarrassing thing you can be. Spoiler alert, according to that, I am an old maid. I've never been married. And there was a lot of stigma. I felt a lot of stigma when I was younger, and a lot of fear of ending up never finding a partner. And I can only tell you, if you are a woman who is afraid you're going to end up never having partnered up, by the time you get to your 50s, many people who did partner up at the traditional time, which is like mid to late 20s through your 30s, many of those people are single again in their 50s. And then it's like a free-for-all. No one knows what anyone's doing. No one is really... Also, no one cares what you do when you're a woman in your 50s. They assume that you are an empty husk, that everything inside you that is valuable to society has shriveled up, and that you can do whatever the fuck you want. One day, if I ever have a good paying acting job again, I'm going to fucking figure out how to purchase and fly around on a witch's broom. Someone has got to know how to make that happen. We have a bunch of things that fly. There are those things that people have. There's TikTok videos of people being in the water, and it's like it's a thing. It's like a ride almost that you can purchase. You're at an ocean resort. There's a guy standing on a platform. You're on a dock. There's a guy not standing on a platform. He's standing on something. He's over the water, though. So there's clearly an engine under him keeping him afloat on this thing. And then you step onto it, and he holds you and you hold him, and then you both shoot up into the sky. If they can make that, they can make a fucking witch's broom. And no one is going to give a shit. Anyway, I just thought, well, she's in the South. She's Christian. And she has all this money, and so she met a guy who wanted to marry into her money, and I guess I can't blame her. Way more to it. But what we find out is we meet a woman who was in a long-term relationship with Joe Lara. Her name's Natasha Pavlovich. They have a daughter together, and she's in the documentary because she does not want her daughter to be sucked into this cult, and her daughter is already very unhappy. They have 50-50 split custody. Her daughter does not like living with her dad and Gwen, her stepmom. So Natasha's in a custody battle to get full custody of her daughter because she doesn't like the way Gwen and Joe are treating her daughter. At the end of episode 1 of this docu-series, Natasha says, Gwen Shamblin was expecting me to go away like all the others who she's intimidated with her money and lawyers. She didn't expect me to be as strong as she is. And then Natasha looks directly into the camera and says, surprise, I'm not going anywhere. And that was a great way to end that episode. Now, there's 4 more fucking episodes, and I only got through, I'm going to do a few minutes of episode 2, and then I'll cover the rest of it in a part 2. So I know that all is a bunch of episodes and parts. So let me clarify. Fuck. This is a 5-part docu-series on HBO, and I'm going to cover it in 2 episodes of this podcast, 2 main episodes, not Patreon. This is part 1. Next week I'll record part 2 where I will have condensed my notes and be able to get through the rest of the episodes. But I will say, originally it was only a 3-part docu-series, and then after it came out, many things developed, and they made 2 more parts months, if not close to a year after the first 3 came out. Okay. Episode 2, I said, okay, now I get why they asked if she thinks it's appropriate to use the Holocaust to promote her weight loss program, because she says when people were in prison camps and given way less food, they all lost weight. Joe Lara, the man she married at the end of episode 1, or who we found out about at the end of episode 1, he was a model and an actor, and they have a lot of footage of him when he was young, and he was super handsome. He played Tarzan in a movie called Tarzan in Brooklyn or something like that. But he was super good looking. He dated a lot of women with money to be able to have the lifestyle that he wanted, because he didn't work except for whenever he could get acting jobs. So then he buys a trailer in the desert near Palmdale, has a drug problem and drinking problem. He's been doing drugs since he was 14. Natasha loves him, and they have a daughter together, and then they move to Nashville so that he can pursue a country music career, I think in the early 2000s. I don't know, but there was a thing, because Alan Jackson wrote a song about it called Gone Country. There was a thing in the 90s where people who wanted to be rock singers or pop singers and failed tried country and succeeded. So he can't succeed as an actor, so he decides to become a country music star. They have this agreement that when their daughter reaches kindergarten, if he hasn't made it in Nashville, they will move to Chicago, where Natasha's family is. She has a huge amount of family and friends there. She has a home there, and they'll move there so her daughter can be going to school and growing up around a bunch of family. Joe doesn't want her to move. I don't know why. Because you don't get any real sense of him as being someone who was could have had the capacity to be a great dad. But he doesn't want her to move to Chicago, and so he to keep Natasha from moving his daughter to Chicago, he goes to the police station and files a police report accusing Natasha of molesting their daughter, which is not true. They have testimony from the daughter herself, doctors, counselors, therapists. He just said it because he knew that then they would enter a legal battle and she wouldn't be allowed to take their daughter out of state. So then Joe becomes a handyman in Nashville. So Brentwood is just outside of Nashville. So Joe's a handyman to make a living, becomes part of a network of handymen who recommend each other for jobs. They tell him about the Remnant Church. He goes there. He gets an eyeful of Gwen, who we still don't know about her first husband, David. All we think is, oh, he sees this single woman who's in her late 50s, early 60s, who's super wealthy and powerful. And he's like, I'm still good. I'm older now. There's a little wear and tear because I've been drinking and doing drugs my whole life, but I'm still good looking enough and younger than her. I bet I could get her. And he does. And there's a recording studio in the Remnant Fellowship Church so that he can keep trying to become a country music star. They get married. That doesn't work, so they get married and they start a YouTube show called Life with Gwen and Joe, where they preach and he pretends to be religious. Natasha and other people who knew Joe were like, I was very startled that he was doing this. He's never been a religious person. He just was doing it as an act because Gwen adored him because he was hot and younger, and she gave him this lavish lifestyle. Okay. Oh, and then we find out Gwen Gwen had a first husband who I'm gonna wrap it up and I'll cover the rest of this in part 2, which will come out next week. Here's what you need to know about David Shamblin. They were married for 40 years. They had 2 children, Michael and Elizabeth. He was overweight. And so when her Way Down, not just when her Way Down workshop and Way Down diet and books took off, but when they started the Remnant Fellowship Church and she started heavily preaching that the most important thing you can do is obey God's authority. And the proof that you're doing that is that you're not putting anything above God, which means you could not possibly be overweight if you're obeying God, because that means you're putting food before God. And her husband was overweight. And so she just pushed him out and divorced him. And up to that point, before she divorced David, she was preaching that divorce was not okay, which is very common in conservative, especially Southern conservative Christian churches. It's very common to tell people, and not just Southern, conservative Christian churches, and including Mormons, very heavily discourage people from getting divorced, even in cases of abuse. And she was, or in cases of infidelity. And one of the ex-members says, there are a bunch of us women who for years had been having the biblical authority to get divorced, meaning the Bible says, according to them, the Bible says you can get a divorce from your husband if he is cheating on you. And he was, and they knew about it and still told her she couldn't get a divorce. And then Gwen got a divorce. And then all these other women were like, well, hey, let me throw my hat in that ring. They got divorced. We're going to leave it there. We'll get back to David and the rest of the docu-series in part 2. As always, ending, put no thought into how to end this episode. And that's not true. I did. This is the thought I put into it. Last night, Again, I had guests, my nephew and his girlfriend. I'm just saying that to say I didn't have my full focus. But if I'm being honest, if I had had my full focus and no guests, I would have just been scrolling my phone anyway. But I did think last night and this morning, I need to think about how to end the episode because I keep talking about you want to end strong. So I did think I gotta figure out how to end strong, and that was the last I thought about it until now. So keeping hope alive that it's gonna happen one day, but for now, thank you for listening and watching. Really appreciate you, and um, please, I'm begging you, don't join a cult of any kind, but especially not this kind. Okay, thank you.